Sign this now or you'll be out of this industry permanently. The words sliced through the air as my supervisor Marcus Reynolds slid the resignation papers across his mahogany desk. His fingers drummed impatiently against the leather portfolio, each tap echoing like a countdown timer. The corner office felt suffocating, the floor-to-ceiling windows showing the city skyline that had once inspired me, now mocking my predicament. "I need your signature today, Amelia." His voice carried that familiar condescending tone that had become my daily soundtrack. "Your recent performance issues leave us no choice. This is the professional way to handle things." 5 years of breakthrough marketing campaigns flashed through my mind. The product launches that exceeded targets by 200%. The client acquisitions that saved the company during the economic downturn. The strategies he'd taken credit for in boardroom presentations, while I sat silently in the back row. And now, after I'd questioned those mysterious budget transfers in the last quarterly report, here we were. I reached for the pen, my hand trembling slightly, the resignation letter swimming before my eyes. But one phrase stood out like a beacon: voluntary resignation due to personal reasons. I glanced up at Marcus's smug expression, at the security badge he'd already prepared for my escort out, and made my decision. What he didn't know was that I'd been ready for this moment. For months, I'd been building my defense, documenting every irregular request, every questionable decision, every subtle threat. I'd studied employment law during my lunch breaks, researched precedents until my eyes burned from screen glare. I signed without hesitation, but when Marcus stepped away to print my final paperwork, I made one crucial modification to the document. His fatal error was underestimating the power of preparation. "Before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand something vital. In a world designed to silence you, knowledge becomes your strongest weapon. If you've ever felt cornered by someone who seemed untouchable, stay with me because this story isn't just about revenge, it's about reclaiming your voice when everyone expects you to stay quiet." My name is Amelia Chun, and until 4 months ago, I was the senior marketing strategist at Pinnacle Solutions. I'm 32, divorced, with an MBA in strategic communications and a certificate in digital forensics I earned during weekend classes. Most people would describe me as methodical, some might say obsessive about precision. I organize my life in color-coded systems, keep detailed project timelines, and can spot inconsistencies in data like others notice rain clouds. My grandmother, who raised me after my parents died in a car accident, always said, "Amelia, the devil is in the details, but so is salvation. Pay attention to what others overlook." This became my survival strategy. Notice the patterns everyone else ignores. When I joined Pinnacle 6 years ago, the company was riding high on innovative digital marketing solutions. The founder, Catherine Pinnacle, had built a reputation for cutting-edge strategies and ethical business practices. The company motto, "Elevating Brands, Empowering Futures," was everywhere, on walls, websites, and water bottles. I believed in it wholeheartedly. Marcus Reynolds joined as my direct supervisor 3 years into my tenure. He'd transferred from our Chicago office with impressive credentials and a track record of turning around struggling departments. Tall, confident, with salt and pepper hair and a voice that commanded rooms, Marcus moved through the office like he owned everyone in it. The executive team loved him. The board celebrated his innovative approaches. The problems started small. My name began vanishing from campaign credits. Then came the mysterious exclusions from strategy meetings I'd always attended. My proposals required endless revisions for clarity, while male colleagues with similar work got immediate approvals. "You're overthinking this," my colleague Jessica whispered when I mentioned the pattern. "Marcus is just thorough. He treats everyone the same way." But he didn't. I started documenting everything. Dates, times, witnesses, exact conversations. When Marcus praised Daniel for the rebranding concept I developed. When he cut me off mid-presentation but gave others uninterrupted time. When he scheduled client calls during my pre-approved medical appointments, despite my calendar clearly showing the conflicts. Despite everything, I excelled. Our department's client retention increased by 35% using my relationship management system. I created a predictive analytics tool that identified market trends 3 months ahead of competitors. I stayed visible, valuable, and vigilant. Then I noticed the budget discrepancies. It started with an anomaly in the third quarter financial summary. Fund transfers between project budgets without proper approval codes. Small amounts, easily missed, but following a distinct pattern. I cross-referenced previous quarters and found similar irregularities dating back to Marcus's arrival. These transfers need explanation, I said during our one-on-one meeting, sliding the highlighted printouts across his desk. The approval chain is incomplete. Marcus barely glanced at the documents. Finance cleared these. You're overreaching, Amelia. But finance requires department head authorization for cross-project transfers. These don't have them. His expression shifted then, something cold replacing his usual dismissive smirk. Drop it. This isn't your lane. I didn't drop it. Instead, I created an encrypted folder on my personal cloud storage and continued gathering evidence. The pattern expanded, budget reallocations coinciding with performance bonuses, vendor contracts with suspicious pricing structures, expense reports with consistent anomalies. The hostility escalated systematically. My performance review, previously rated exceeds expectations, suddenly cited communication challenges and failure to support team cohesion. My high-profile assignments shifted to administrative tasks. My emails to other department heads went unanswered. He's building a case against you, warned Lisa from legal during an after-work coffee. Document everything. Be smart about this. I was already documenting everything. But now I added evening research sessions on employment law, corporate whistleblower protections, and constructive dismissal cases. I installed a recording app on my phone. I forwarded critical emails to my personal account. I photographed documents that mysteriously disappeared from shared servers. The final escalation came after the quarterly executive review. Catherine Pinnacle had praised my market analysis, asking me to lead the presentation at the next board meeting. Outstanding work, Amelia, she said, shaking my hand. This is exactly the strategic thinking we need moving forward. Marcus's smile remained fixed, but his eyes tracked me like a hawk throughout the rest of the meeting. That afternoon, my access to several key databases was temporarily suspended for system updates. The next morning, an email announced that Daniel would handle the board presentation due to his broader departmental perspective. When I questioned this change, Marcus called me into his office. Your attitude has become problematic, he said, carefully closing the door. Several team members have expressed concerns about your collaborative approach. Which team members? I asked. I'd like to address their concerns directly. That's not appropriate. This is a pattern, Amelia. First, these baseless accusations about financial irregularities. Now, this resistance to management decisions. Asking for clarification isn't resistance. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. Let me be crystal clear. Your position here is becoming precarious. I'd suggest focusing on performance improvement rather than questioning established processes. That evening, I contacted an employment attorney. Sarah Martinez listened carefully to my account, reviewing the evidence I'd compiled. This is textbook hostile work environment, she said, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses. Your documentation is exceptional. But here's the reality, these cases are exhausting, expensive, and often career-damaging, even when you win. So I should just quit? No. She tapped my evidence folder. If they want you gone, make them work for it. Constructive dismissal settlements can be significant with documentation like this. But be prepared, they'll likely force a resignation first. She was right. Within days, Marcus began copying HR on minor issues with my work. A week later, I received my first formal warning for missing deadlines on projects given with impossible timeframes. The following week, my workstation was relocated to an isolated corner near the server room, where the constant mechanical hum made phone calls nearly impossible. Through it all, I maintained meticulous records. I responded to every accusation with documented facts. I remained professionally cordial in every interaction. And I prepared for the inevitable confrontation. It came on a Thursday morning. My calendar updated with an urgent meeting in conference room C. No agenda, no other attendees listed. Just Marcus. As I walked toward the conference room, Jessica passed me in the hallway, her expression tense. He's been with HR all morning, she murmured without stopping. Something big is happening. I nodded, my contingency plan crystallizing. In my bag was a portfolio containing chronologically organized copies of all my evidence. My phone was recording, and I'd memorized the standard resignation template used by Pinnacle Solutions, including all its legal implications. Which brings us back to that mahogany desk, those resignation papers, and Marcus's ultimatum. When he stepped away to print my exit paperwork, I didn't hesitate. With steady hands, I crossed out voluntary resignation due to personal reasons, and wrote above it, constructive dismissal due to systematic workplace harassment. I added the date and time in the margin, my handwriting clear and deliberate. Marcus returned, grabbed the paper without reading it, and smiled with the satisfaction of someone who believes they've won. "Clear out your desk by 5 p.m. Security will escort you out." "I understand," I said, maintaining direct eye contact. "I'll need a copy of this for my records." His smile flickered briefly. "HR will handle the paperwork." I nodded and stood to leave. As I reached the door, I turned back. "Just to confirm, this meeting was at your request? To discuss my employment status?" "Yes," he said impatiently. "As documented in the letter you just signed." "Thank you for clarifying that." I closed the door behind me, heart racing but mind clear. In the bathroom, I took deep breaths until my hands stopped shaking. Then I called Sarah Martinez. "It happened," I said. "Exactly as you predicted." "Did you make the amendment?" "Yes." He didn't notice. "Perfect. Send me everything now. I'll have the formal complaint ready within 2 hours." By 4 p.m., I had packed my personal items into a small box. As promised, a security guard named Robert waited nearby, looking uncomfortable with his assignment. "I'm sorry about this, Miss Chen," he said quietly. "Never seemed right to me, letting someone like you go." "Thank you, Robert. That means a lot." Before leaving, I made 2 strategic stops. First, to the Human Resources Department, where I handed Director Patricia Stone a sealed envelope. "This is a formal complaint of constructive dismissal and workplace harassment," I said, my voice steady. "It includes the amended resignation letter that Mr. Reynolds provided today, which I corrected before signing to accurately reflect the circumstances. I've also included comprehensive documentation of the ongoing issues that led to this situation." Patricia's expression remained neutral, but her eyebrows rose slightly. "I'll review this immediately. My attorney will contact you tomorrow morning. She has copies of everything in that envelope." My second stop was Jessica's desk. She looked up, startled to see me with the security guard waiting several feet away. "You're leaving?" she asked, half rising from her chair. "Not by choice," I replied. "But before I go, check the shared drive. Marketing financials, quarterly historical folder. Look for the transfer patterns in files marked with Marcus's initials. Cross-reference them with the executive bonus schedule." Her forehead creased. "Amelia, what are you saying?" "Just look. And be careful who you discuss it with." I squeezed her shoulder and walked away. Robert escorted me to the lobby, insisting on carrying my box despite my protests. At the main entrance, he paused. "You know, Miss Chen, I've worked security here for 15 years. Seen a lot of people come and go. The ones who leave quietly when they've done nothing wrong, they never come back. But the ones who stand their ground." He smiled slightly. "They often do." If you've ever faced injustice that felt too powerful to challenge, if you've ever swallowed your words because speaking up seemed too dangerous, stay with me. Because what happened next didn't just change my career, it changed my entire understanding of how power really works. But before I continue, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you believe in standing up for what's right, even when it's terrifying. Hit that notification bell because the conclusion reveals exactly how preparation, documentation, and courage can transform a moment of powerlessness into justice that ripples far beyond anything you could imagine. That night, I couldn't sleep. Instead, I sat by my apartment window, watching the city lights while replaying the day's events. The air felt different somehow, cleaner, despite the uncertainty ahead. For the first time in months, I could breathe deeply without the chest tightness that had become so familiar I'd stopped noticing it. My phone rang at 8:47 the next morning. Unknown number. Amelia Chen speaking. "Ms. Chen, this is Patricia Stone from Human Resources." Her voice sounded strained. We've reviewed your documentation and need you to come in this morning for a meeting with senior leadership. Am I to understand I'm still employed at Pinnacle then? A pause. Your employment status is complex at present. The document you submitted creates a legal situation we need to address immediately. I'll be there at 10 a.m. with my attorney. That won't be. I'll be there at 10 a.m. with my attorney, I repeated, my voice calm but firm. Or we can proceed directly to formal litigation. Another pause. 10 a.m. Executive conference room. I texted Sarah immediately, and she agreed to meet me at a coffee shop near the office at 9:30. When I arrived, she was already there, impeccable in a navy suit, spreading documents across a corner table. They're in panic mode, she said without preamble. I received 4 calls from their legal department last night, each more conciliatory than the last. Your documentation is exceptional. What should I expect? They'll try to minimize the situation. They'll offer settlements with non-disclosure agreements. They'll attempt to separate Marcus's behavior from company liability. She organized the papers into a precise stack. Our position is straightforward. The company enabled a hostile work environment through inadequate oversight. We have evidence of both the harassment and the financial irregularities you identified. And if they refuse to acknowledge it? Sarah's smile was sharp and precise. Then we proceed with formal charges that will trigger external audits and public disclosure requirements. Their choice. At 9:58, we walked through Pinnacle's main entrance. Robert was at the security desk, his eyebrows rising in surprise as I approached. Ms. Chen, he smiled slightly. Didn't expect to see you back so soon. Circumstances evolve, I replied, signing the visitor log. That they do, he handed me a temporary badge. Executive floor is quite busy this morning. Lots of unscheduled meetings. In the elevator, Sarah reviewed our strategy one final time. Let them speak first. We need to understand their position before revealing our full hand. The executive floor reception area buzzed with unusual activity. Assistants hurried between offices, arms full of files. Through glass walls, I glimpsed executives in heated discussions. Near the main conference room, Jessica stood talking with Lisa from legal, both looking pale and serious. When Jessica spotted me, her eyes widened and she gave an almost imperceptible nod. Patricia Stone emerged from the conference room, her usual composure slightly cracked. Ms. Chen, thank you for coming. And you must be Sarah Martinez, legal counsel for Ms. Chen. Sarah extended her hand. Shall we begin? Inside the conference room sat Catherine Pinnacle herself, flanked by the company's general counsel and chief financial officer. Conspicuously absent was Marcus. Ms. Chen, Catherine began, her normally warm voice formal. We've reviewed your complaint and supporting documentation. The allegations are serious and troubling. They're not allegations, I corrected quietly. They're documented facts. The general counsel, a woman named Rebecca whose last name I'd never learned, cleared her throat. Before we continue, we want to emphasize that Pinnacle Solutions takes workplace conduct extremely seriously. If there have been policy violations, we want to address them appropriately. If. Sarah echoed, making the single word sound dangerous. Catherine raised a hand slightly. We're not disputing Ms. Chen's experiences. We're trying to understand the complete scope of the situation. The scope extends beyond my client, Sarah said. Based on our preliminary investigation, multiple employees have experienced similar treatment under Mr. Reynolds's supervision. A flash of genuine surprise crossed Catherine's face. You've spoken with other employees? No, I interjected. But they've begun speaking with your HR department as of yesterday afternoon. I believe 4 people from different departments have already come forward. Patricia nodded almost imperceptibly, confirming my statement. We're also concerned about the financial irregularities Ms. Chen identified, Sarah continued. Those require immediate investigation by independent auditors. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. We have internal audit procedures, which failed to catch these discrepancies for 3 years, I finished. That suggests either negligence or complicity in your financial oversight systems. The room fell silent. Catherine studied me with new intensity, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. "What exactly are you seeking, Ms. Chun?" she finally asked. Sarah opened her portfolio. Full reinstatement with back pay from the date of constructive dismissal. A comprehensive independent investigation into both the hostile work environment and financial irregularities. Accountability for all parties involved in either creating or enabling these conditions. And structural changes to prevent similar situations in the future. "And if we counter with a settlement offer?" Rebecca asked. "Then we proceed with formal charges that will necessitate public disclosure," Sarah replied evenly. "My client isn't interested in being silenced with money." Catherine leaned forward. "And Mr. Reynolds, what do you expect regarding his position?" I met her gaze directly. "That's for you to determine after a proper investigation. But I will not work under his supervision again." The meeting continued for another hour, cycling through legalities, processes, and next steps. By its conclusion, I had been formally reinstated with temporary reassignment to the strategic planning team, reporting directly to the CFO. An independent investigative firm would arrive Monday morning. And Marcus had been placed on administrative leave, pending the investigation's outcome. As we prepared to leave, Catherine asked Sarah for a moment alone with me. After confirming I was comfortable with this, Sarah stepped outside. "I owe you an apology," Catherine said once we were alone. "I built this company on principles of respect and integrity. I failed to see what was happening in your department." "Hierarchies can create blind spots," I replied. "Even for the most well-intentioned leaders." She nodded slowly. "The financial discrepancies you identified, how extensive do you believe they are?" "Significant enough to affect quarterly reports. Systematic enough to suggest intentional manipulation. And patterned in ways that correlate with executive compensation structures." Something hardened in her expression. "I see. That changes the nature of this situation considerably." "Yes, it does." I stood to leave. "One question, if I may. Was Marcus informed of my reinstatement?" "He was notified of his administrative leave this morning. He doesn't yet know the full circumstances." She paused. "He's expected to clear his office Monday morning under supervision." As I exited the conference room, Jessica was waiting near the elevators. "You magnificent, terrifying woman," she whispered as I approached. "The entire marketing department is in chaos. They've locked down all the servers Marcus had access to." "Did you look at those folders?" She nodded. "I did, and I made copies before reporting it. The patterns were impossible to miss once you knew where to look." She hesitated. "I should have listened when you first raised concerns." "I'm sorry." "What matters is that you looked eventually. Truth requires witnesses to have power." The next 2 weeks unfolded with breathtaking speed. The independent investigators established a temporary office on the 4th floor, interviewing dozens of employees. I spent hours walking them through my documentation, explaining the patterns I'd identified in both workplace behavior and financial records. By the end of the first week, the count of employees who had reported inappropriate behavior from Marcus had reached 13, 9 women and 4 men, spanning multiple departments. The financial investigation had expanded to include relationships with 5 vendor companies and suspicious patterns in project allocations. I returned to my regular workspace, now relocated to a bright corner near the strategic planning team's hub. Colleagues who had previously avoided eye contact now stopped by with coffee and questions. Some apologized for their silence. Others shared stories of their own uncomfortable experiences. The atmosphere throughout the office had shifted, tension releasing in some areas, intensifying in others as people reconsidered their own complicity in what had happened. On Wednesday of the second week, Sarah called with an update. "The initial findings are devastating," she said. "The investigators have identified what appears to be a kickback scheme involving vendor contracts. Marcus was directing business to companies where he had undisclosed financial interests, then manipulating internal budgets to hide the inflated costs." "How much money are we talking about?" "Preliminary estimate is $2.3 million over 3 years. And they've only examined about half the contracts flagged in your documentation." I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of my apartment window. What happens next? The company has 2 choices. Handle this internally with termination and potential civil recovery, or involve law enforcement for criminal charges. Given the scope, I suspect they'll have to pursue the latter. She was right. The following Friday, Catherine called an all-staff meeting. Her normally polished appearance showed subtle signs of strain, a wrinkled collar, hair pulled back more severely than usual. "I want to address the ongoing investigation directly," she began, her voice carrying across the packed auditorium. "What began as a workplace conduct complaint has uncovered financial improprieties that cannot be ignored or handled internally. We have filed formal reports with the appropriate authorities, who will be conducting their own investigation." A murmur rippled through the room. "I take full responsibility for the oversight failures that allowed this to happen," she continued. "We are implementing immediate changes to our financial controls, reporting structures, and management oversight. Most importantly, we are creating new channels for employees to report concerns without fear of retaliation." She paused, scanning the room. "To those who experienced mistreatment and felt unable to speak up, I apologize. To those who did speak up and weren't heard, I apologize more deeply. And to the person who finally forced us to listen." Her eyes found mine. "I am both sorry and grateful." The changes came rapidly after that. New financial oversight protocols, restructured reporting relationships, mandatory training on workplace conduct and whistleblower protections. The investigation expanded, then concluded after 8 weeks with a comprehensive report that left the executive team visibly shaken. Marcus never returned to the building after his administrative leave began. According to office rumors, he had hired a criminal defense attorney and was attempting to negotiate reduced charges in exchange for information about broader involvement in the financial schemes, implying that others in leadership had known or participated. For months after I'd amended that resignation letter, I received 2 unexpected communications. The first was an email from Catherine asking me to consider a new position, Director of Compliance and Ethics, reporting directly to her with oversight of integrity protocols across all departments. The second was a voicemail from an unknown number, left at 2 a.m. "You destroyed everything I built. I hope you're satisfied with what you've accomplished." Marcus's final attempt at intimidation, sent the day before his arraignment on multiple fraud charges. I didn't respond to his message. There was nothing to say. This hadn't been about destroying him, it had been about refusing to be destroyed myself. I accepted the director position after negotiating both the compensation and authority the role required. My first official act was to implement a system allowing anonymous reporting of ethical concerns with mandatory investigation protocols. My second was to recommend promotions for both Jessica and Lisa, who had provided crucial support during the investigation. The company announced the organizational changes at the quarterly all-hands meeting, where Catherine publicly acknowledged the painful but necessary transformation Pinnacle had undergone. "Sometimes the most valuable contributions come from those willing to speak uncomfortable truths," she said, inviting me to the podium. Amelia Chun turned a moment of injustice into an opportunity for institutional improvement. "We're grateful she chose to fight for what's right rather than walk away." As I stepped up to speak, I saw Robert at the back of the room giving me a small thumbs up. I thought of my grandmother's words about finding salvation in the details, and how sometimes examining those small connections can transform an entire system. 8 months ago, I was told to sign a resignation letter or never work in this industry again, I began. I signed, but not what was expected. That moment taught me something crucial. Power doesn't always rest with those who appear to hold it. Sometimes power lies in knowledge, in preparation, in the willingness to stand firm when others expect you to crumble. I looked out at the faces watching me. Some I knew well, others barely at all. All part of the system I'd helped reshape. The paper I signed that day wasn't just about my job. It was about whether we accept environments where intimidation outweighs integrity. About whether we allow fear to silence truth. Each of us makes that choice daily, in ways large and small. I paused, remembering the weight of the pen in my hand that day, the clarity that had come in that moment of decision. I chose to change a few words on a document. That choice triggered a transformation none of us could have predicted. Your choices matter too. Even the small ones. Especially the small ones. They compound into the culture we create together. As for Marcus, the legal system delivered its own form of justice. After pleading guilty to reduced charges, he received a 4-year sentence and full restitution order. His professional reputation was destroyed, not through dramatic exposure, but through the systematic documentation of his own choices he'd made believing no one was watching carefully enough to catch him. The industry conferences where he'd once been a featured speaker now used his case as a cautionary example of corporate ethics failures. The same precision he'd used to manipulate systems became the tool of his undoing when those systems were properly examined. The most profound victory, however, wasn't about his downfall. It was watching Pinnacle transform into the company it had always claimed to be. Watching colleagues find their voices after years of silence. Witnessing the power of documented truth against systematic deception. 1 year after amending that resignation letter, I received a Professional Excellence Award for the compliance framework I developed. As I accepted it, I spotted a familiar face in the audience, Sarah Martinez, now heading a specialized practice focusing on workplace justice cases. "You didn't just win a case," she told me at the reception afterward. "You changed how an entire company understands accountability. That's remarkably rare." "It wasn't just me," I replied. "It was everyone who spoke up afterward. Everyone who had been waiting for permission to tell the truth." She smiled. "But someone had to go first. Someone had to show it was possible." That evening, I called my grandmother to tell her about the award. "You were right, Grandma," I said. "The details really do determine whether the whole system works or fails." "And the smallest changes," she replied, pride warming her voice, "can sometimes reset everything." If this story resonated with you, I hope you'll share your own experience in the comments below. Have you ever faced a moment where changing one small thing, one word, one decision, one action, transformed your situation? Or perhaps you're facing such a moment now and gathering the courage to act. Remember, power often lies not with those who intimidate, but with those who refuse to be intimidated. Like this video if you believe in standing up for what's right, and subscribe to hear more stories of ordinary courage that leads to extraordinary change. Because sometimes the most important signature isn't on a resignation letter, it's on the decision to trust your own worth enough to defend it.